Welcome to the story of Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop. This is Chapter 13, Millie's Birthday. Surely everything is going to go perfectly right for the day she chose to celebrate. I'm the author, Ray Dubicki, and I'm happy to read this story to you, and even happier to be on Reggie and Pat's good side. You can join Millie Salmon on Patreon or find more at milliesalmon.com. And you can follow this podcast and other stories on social media at Infinite Shop Limited. Chapter 13, Millie's Birthday. Millie woke up happy. She went into the kitchen. Something seemed a bit quiet. Where's Evan? Dad was at the dining room table, working through a couple books and a notepad. He's not coming today. Any reason? It is Wednesday, and we have some things to get ready. He paused, dramatically gave a sideways glance to see if Millie was reacting. For your birthday! That was the right answer. It was her birthday. The one she had lived with for all her now 13 years. She now knew it was technically not the day she was born, but January 11th was more than that. It was now the day she chose. Can I ask something? Go ahead. Am I getting a cake from somewhere? Dad got up and opened the freezer. A red and blue box took up the middle of the top shelf. It was an ice cream cake. Awesome. Millie chose the 11th of January because it was fun to write. 01/11/10 if she was using her full birth date. She chose it because it was close enough to garner the pity of being in the shadow of Christmas, yet far enough after to not get it confused. More than anything else, she chose it because it was hers. No one else she knew had a birthday so early in the year. So many kids got bunched up in August and September. Mom's birthday was in May and Dad's in November. Actually, she'd have to check if those were the real dates too. Probably not, but their stuff could wait until after her day was finished. Millie floated through the morning at school. Pat gave her a card that was obviously from his mom's stash of flowered or baby greeting cards, but he filled it with a handwritten note that ended with, "Ever gaming together, Pats." Reggie gave her flowers. There was no explanation of their source, and Millie didn't ask. Nor did she think about what to do with them. She thanked and hugged them both. She meandered through homeroom and into the first class. They were a week into the new year, new semester, new schedule. They could get the math out of the way early, particularly the relationship gauntlet between Pat's and Mrs. Hawkins. They didn't have to wait until after lunch for that to ruin their day. It was still just after break, and the teachers thought the kids needed to review all of the learning loss that occurred over 2 weeks away from the intense education experience that was school. Mrs. Hawkins was now repeating the same thing they had covered just before Christmas. Multiplying fractions yet again. Millie opened her drawing book on her lap and began doodling. The doodle started small and piecemeal, a curling, sketchy line snaking in the top corner of the page. It bent around and snaked into a little pointed tail. The point, a little arrowhead, looked like a mouth biting a long spaghetti. She sketched a nose and a chin around the mouth. No eyes, it tapered back into a neck. She drew a cuff on the neck and then a wrist in the cuff. A monster puppet eating spaghetti. She didn't hear Mrs. Hawkins ask her a question, nor the second time Hawkins asked. She didn't even really pay attention to Hawkins moving towards her until the teacher took the book from under her pencil. Hey! That was really the only thing Millie could think to say. Millie, answer the question. No, give that back now. That's my book. You are expected to participate in class, not doodle. Hawkins tossed the book on the desk at the front of the room. You have a word problem in front of you. Please tell the class how you solved it. I handed in my homework. It's all correct. You cannot be sure it's all correct. I have not checked it. It's plenty correct because it is exactly the same questions you gave us last week. And the week before break, I got all of them correct. Why are you bothering me now? This class is not a bother. It's your job. And you will be here until you decide to participate. It was silent in the class. Millie studied the tense, slender face of the math teacher. Really, for the first time, Millie saw Hawkins, an ancient old woman, probably in her 40s, that couldn't help being angry. Her thin and collared plaid shirt was creased as her face, holding an edge across the shoulders that probably repeated her pointy collarbone. Hawkins' hair was only put together into a ponytail if you ignored the random gray thatch sticking out of the temples. Of course, Hawkins could only torture kids with math. She was all angles. Their eyes stayed locked as a heavy acid of disgust welled in the back of Millie's throat. She swallowed hard, and everything felt very serene and clear for a moment. This woman had no power over her. She was now 13 years old. Her back straightened. Millie had already seen things this sawtooth could never imagine. Millie barely felt herself lift from the desk, glide by Hawkins, and leave the room. She did register that she picked up her drawing book on the way. On the other side of the classroom door, feelings returned, quickly and harshly. It registered that the whole class had been staring at her, and she simply had left. Millie had walked out of the classroom. Her eyes were shaking. She held the book tight against her chest. Walking purposefully, she marched towards the front of school. Anyone outside her body would have said Millie ran. Millie would later think about this moment not obsessively, only triggered by a scent or a glance. She never tried to remember it in detail, but realized she absorbed many things. There was the smell of Reggie's flowers left behind. There was the buzzing silence of classes going on, with the droned talking of a teacher or the mumble and squeaking chair legs of teens breaking into group work. Hawkins had called down the hallway, demanding her return and threatening her with detention. There was one image that stuck out above all else. From the front of the school, the sun came in through the narrow glass windows in the doors. They created long, even streaks of light that angled from left to right, breaking the checkerboard tiled corridor with 5 golden slashes. Where they hit the wall of lockers, the sunbeams turned sharply and went straight up the wall. She was that sunbeam, hitting a very sharp wall. Running down the hall at speed, Millie quickly approached a turning point. She had felt serene. Now she just wanted to sit down and cry. This was uncharted territory. Millie felt the edge. Behind was the known threat of detention. A return to a room head down and defeated, whatever scorn from Mom and Dad. Ahead was something else, something that didn't include limping back into Hawkins' classroom defeated. Stopping meant humiliation and all the things she'd seen Hawkins do to Pats. Ahead was something, anything else. Millie stepped into the unknown. She walked out of school. At the girl's back, Rafaela Hawkins watched Millie go through the front door of the school. This was a troubling development. That girl's parents are much more trouble than she is worth. Rafaela Hawkins adjusted her belt and returned to the classroom. This was more troubling than expected. The students would normally be titters and whispers after a scene like that, but they were stone silent. Hawkins felt the odd heat of 30 pairs of eyes upon her. The two boys who sat flank on Salmon were having bigger issues. Reginald Tarascal was sweating through a rock-tight jaw. The preposterous Patrick Pantajalli Patrice was panting and moving from a robust rose color to a bruised purple. There was a set of flowers on the book rack under Salmon's chair. Hawkins picked up the telephone and called down to the main office. Principal's office. Hi, Rafaela. Hello, Miss Enders. This is Mrs. Hawkins. She would not let go of the formality of the student-facing side of the conversation. A student has left my classroom and walked straight out of the building. Okay, give me the class session number and the student name. Class is for 2010 mathematics. The student is Millie Salmon. Are you sure it's Millie Salmon? Really? Yes. Hawkins did not need to correct that dumb secretary Billy Enders over the phone. There was a growing sense that one wrong word in front of this class and she would be nailed to the whiteboard. That Patrick character was staring a hole through her. Well, we'll notify her parents. You have a planning period next, so you probably should come down and get ready to talk with Miss Mitchell. I will. Not to justify myself to you or take your moronic advice, that last part did not come out over the phone. She turned back to the class, who were all suddenly standing. Reginald was leading them in a rhythmic stomp. Jules was not at home when he got the phone call from Millie's school. He was in a place very far away that normal cell phone reception would not reach. When the secretary, the very lovely Miss Billy Enders, who would normally took some time to ask about his day and chat about the changing vegetables at the market, told him that Millie had walked out of school during math class, Jules' response was brief. Are you sure it was Millie Salmon? Really? Yes, the secretary said. Dad put down the decorations and made a very fast run back to the shop. By second period, everyone in the school knew what had happened. The students were not quite sure about the details. The ones that they were certain about were completely fabricated. Contrary to the rumors, Hawkins had not loudly hissed with spiked teeth at Millie. Also, Millie had not kicked out a window and pole vaulted onto a waiting motorcycle. A lot of people thought it was a little weird that Millie kept a drawing book and it was open all the time. No one held that thought for very long when they saw her artwork. Then they would take a little bit to screw up the courage and ask for a drawing. She always said yes. Not close-up portraits, though. There were plenty of people in her bigger pictures, but no portraits, Millie always told them. She had tried, and it got too close to being a caricature. Millie was uncomfortable that she would pick out one feature and dwell on it. Portraits felt a little too close to making fun of a person. Which is why everyone liked Millie. Even Cuddy Larson, the 8th grader who hated everything, didn't mind Millie that much. I mean, she sat next to him on the field day bus last year, and they talked endlessly how heavy 100,000 M&Ms would be. From that day, the always angry Cuddy Larson felt a small sense of not angry at Millie Salmon. Today, that grew into full-fledged kind of okay with when he heard Millie had saved a dog from old Hawkins' bloody teeth and ridden it out the door of school. Cuddy Larson did not like feeling not angry, but being okay with Millie gave him even more reason to hate Mrs. Hawkins, so it kind of made up for it. Mr. Salmon, this is Clay from Tuxedo 2 Movie Theater. Yeah, hi Clay, how are you? I'll cut to the chase. It's before noon, and your daughter is walking around on a school day. She walked your way? Is she in the movie theater? No, sir. It took me a minute to realize who she was when she walked by. I'm sorry about that, but it was really unexpected. I understand, Clay. Did you see which way she was headed? Yes. By the time I ran out and called her name, she was stepping on the number 14 bus at the corner of Light and Hudson Streets. Right after the bus pulled away, I called you. It hasn't been 3 minutes yet. Clay, I'm buying you a big bag of popcorn next time we're in the theater. Thank you. Sir, anything but popcorn. You're very welcome. Millie squinted to look out the tinted window as the bus pushed through Light Street traffic. She noticed it was not actually tinted, instead covered with a film that had tiny little circles punched through. She looked at the circles and wondered what the advertisement wrap covering the bus was trying to sell. She couldn't see outside, only circles. In the hour of marching and running and stumbling and skipping away from school, her eyes had stopped shaking, but she didn't fully trust what she was and was not actually seeing. She felt like the throbbing tongue after a first swig of too hot chocolate, all feeling but no taste. She saw the little holes, but had no idea of the picture advertised outside. Worse, from the inside, she found it hard to not see the world passing by, instead getting caught in the patterns of little circles. Millie had to sit back and blur her vision past the little patterns to make the little clear areas combine to get an idea of where she was. She wasn't that calm yet. The bus was empty, except for two other people and the bus driver. Millie had her school bus pass, so there wasn't any questions from the driver. The older black woman sitting right behind the driver probably didn't want to look at Millie, but the seats made that difficult. Both were facing the aisle with backs to the wall of the bus. They glimpsed each other as their heads bobbed with each hard pothole the bus hit. The woman glanced down, just as Millie did the same, the long, hard floor gaze of the bus rider. The other man was young, but had a tight beard that extended in a perfect square midway down his lime green fleece coat. It was exactly as square as his headphones were round. The music he listened to was inaudibly garbled due to the big earmuffs. Millie could hear enough to find it very melodic and not at all pointy. 2 more blocks rolled under the bus. Millie breathed out, feeling exhale for the first time in an hour. She looked up and found her view through the window screen. There was only a few more blocks to Park Avenue. That road would wrap around into a heart of the fishing pond, which the military had only recently departed from. She wasn't particularly aiming for that location, but it formed a rough square around the neighborhood she knew really well. The idea settled in her brain that this wasn't a complete break with school or reality. She would just depart from the routine long enough to appreciate coming back, avoid the usual places long enough for a good think. Think hard. 2 more blocks rolled under the bus, and no one pushed the yellow tape to tell the bus driver to stop. The local bus shelters at this hour were empty, so the bus continued to use the green lights and haul down the road. Millie, still a burnt tongue, didn't taste her departure from home, but she felt it. All flavor was absent far back in her throat to make her stomach turn sour. She really wanted some more of that tech pie mint from Brentone. That would clear it all. An elbow-shaped roar built in her high chest, telling her that she was leaving, abandoning all she knew. Going past Park Avenue was suddenly far too far. Without fully needing to think, Millie tapped on the tape. The bus stopped at the next intersection just before crossing the wide expanse of Park Avenue. This was far enough. She walked to the front to get off. The bus driver shot her a quizzical look. Dr. Harding Academy is the next stop up, he informed in a half question. The unstated half of the question asked if Millie should really be here. She felt the hefty weight that she absolutely should not. I'm walking over a block to the park school. There was still enough brain rattling around to find a useful answer. That seemed to satisfy the driver, and it was not a full lie. She would walk past the park school on her way somewhere else. She stepped off the bus and waited for it to pull away. The light changed and she crossed the street. Then she crossed it again into the wide median. Park Avenue connected the big natural park in the north part of town with her own smaller, but big enough, park and lake in the neighborhood. Dad described the parks as beads in the necklace, with wide avenues as the golden chain between the beads. She could see that from a map. On the ground, the roads were just traffic and places that didn't like teens with limited cash. Still, this part of Park Avenue had a wide, grassy median between the car lanes. It was lined with gnarled old trees and a meandering path that alternated between bricks and asphalt. Where her part of Hudson Street was squat apartment buildings with shops on the ground floor, this part of Park Avenue was lined with big old homes, all connected in a long strip on either side of the road. No shops, only these red brick or purple stone city castles. The lower windows had iron bars over them, but not ugly cages, like fences at the windows that repeated the low iron gates and handrails at the front of each set of steps leading up to the massive wooden doors. Millie didn't need anyone to see her from those windows, so she walked down the winding path in the middle of the immense treed median. There was only a lane of traffic on each side, but there were 4 rows of trees. Not too many cars crawled over this slow road during the rush of the week, but there was good traffic of squirrels and dog walkers among the city's grassy swatch. Dad also talked about this had been the edge of the city where a trolley line once circled the whole town and ran down the middle of Park Avenue. At some of the intersections, he pointed out, the trolley tracks still erupted from the asphalt, where the roads for silly plastic cars could not bury the hard steel of real trains. She wondered if it would be the storytelling voice Dad would use when she reappeared at home. Regardless of its history, this wide road only carried cars these days. Cars and Millie walking a wide route home and stewing on that idiot Hawkins stealing her drawing pad. There was no need for her to have taken Millie's book. None of the other teachers had a problem with Millie's drawing. She paid very good attention, but needed to think, and having that drawing pad open helped. Another block walking, and it was Mom's voice that reappeared in her mind. Concentrate on what people say with their faces and their moves, not their lips. It was Mom's words, but only kind of Mom's voice. Millie tried to think through Hawkins' look at the time she snatched Millie's drawing pad. She wanted to think what Hawkins was trying to say through actions beyond words, but Millie only kept coming up with a mental picture of that horrible beaked crow screeching at her. She wanted to draw. She had her book, but her pencils were back in math class with her flowers and all her other stuff. Lunchtime, or it would have been. Reggie had the student body in open revolt, a freedom fighter waving the flag from the top of desks that had been piled in a barricade across the hallway. He even found a beret in the band room and tied a scarf around his waist. Pat was controlling the distribution of information through a phone and text tree. While no one had phones on at school, everyone had phones on at school. Somehow, they worked even after the administration tried to stop the uprising by turning off the Wi-Fi routers. The real surprise here was not that Pats could act as a voice of authority. Both Reggie and Millie knew he made a formidable DM and a ferocious friend. No, Reggie was surprised that a fully standing Pats was 3 inches taller than Reggie. It happened rarely, and obviously not since some growth spurt over Christmas. The twins, Ein and Am, were sergeants at arms, distributing ordnance of chaos to the student body. Kids that needed marbles, Sharpies, cell phone plugs, bags of chips, water bottles, bottle rockets, cat ears, face masks, or a 50-gallon drum of lubricant got them through the twins. How they came into the school, Reggie would not reveal. Reggie's plan had 2 parts. He titled it, Too Much, Too Little. The too much was to find the weakest link in the things that made the school run and overwhelm them. Through a little bit of expert computer wizardry by one of the exceedingly quiet 6th graders, every email that had been sent from a teacher's account in the last month very immediately appeared on every printer and copier at every school throughout the city. Somehow, even the wheezing ancient fax machine in the main office got in on the act and printed out Mr. Flan's extensive itinerary for his trip to Rome last summer. This tripped the emergency blanket calling system that usually alerted parents to upcoming vacation days or absences. The message that went out was an automated announcement from 2020 requiring parents to fill out COVID releases and wear masks to school. Those parents who were confused by this, all of them, and called to question the announcement, also all of them, were met with busy signals because a second front used every school landline to make an extensive order of hockey playoff tickets. These tickets were billed to a local fast food establishment that had given Reggie 3 less chicken nuggets than advertised. Reggie was not vindictive. He was just being fair. Too few, so too much in his view. The too little of Reggie's plan deprived the school and the school system of some necessary resources. Given that the teachers could not touch a student, Reggie placed throngs of bodies at the entrance of every bathroom in the building. Coincidentally, 12 district supervisors became stuck in an elevator at the Board of Education headquarters building. The food delivery to the cafeteria delivered 4,000 pounds of frozen haddock rather than pizza crusts that were ordered, and someone lost the key to the groundskeeping motor pool key box, leaving all the lawnmowers and district vehicles idle the entire day. Reggie had absolutely no hand in those things, but when a good plan gets rolling, credit goes to the easiest target. His legend grew, as did momentum, to free Millie. Reggie had prepared for this his entire life. This would be his concert of chaos. It would probably be useful right now to discuss the whereabouts of Mom and Grandpa. Stoney was in a meeting not on Earth when she got a call from Jules, so she silenced the buzzer. When Jules texted back twice with the same message, the phrase fireworks, fireworks, which was their way of saying it was a leave now situation. So she did. She excused herself from the meeting and took his call while leaving the office. Now she was scouring the area on Earth exactly the same as Jules, but backwards and in high heels. Grandpa had gone to a party store on Dalabrator to gather a couple extra decorations and meet Jules at the place they were having the party. He left Firth in charge of the shop. Everyone forgot to call Grandpa, something he would consistently remind them in the future. He had no idea what was going on until he showed up at the party venue they borrowed for Millie's birthday, and Jules was not there. So he poured himself a punch and finished up putting up decorations. After 5th period, or the time when 5th period should have ended, Principal Mitchell was in negotiations with the newly coined student union called the Federation Against Repressive Teachers. Reggie's pride at the name could not be contained, nor could control of the room when Mrs. Mitchell repeated the FART acronym before realizing what she said. Their demands included some long-time irritations, like reopening the water fountains with unleaded water and extra bike racks, as well as some stretch goals such as a helicopter landing pad and free ice cream bars every lunch. At the top of the list was a complete pardon for all students, starting with Millie. Reggie remembered his record being cleared after the cooked goose incident, and Reggie repaid his debts. Of course, the one place Dad and Mom didn't look was the place they expected Millie to be, had it been a normal day and things gone according to plan. Come the time school was drawing to a close, Millie returned home. She had spent the entire day stewing. The city was telling her it was time to go home. The daytime coffee shops were wrapping up, and the evening restaurants were putting glasses on their tables. The chains of kindergartners were leaving the park, and the pickup line formed at the elementary school. The world moved into late afternoon. There was something uncomfortable about not going home also. Dad hadn't gotten really angry, except for the 2 times Millie hadn't shown up when promised. Once when the shop showed her Dalabator, and then with the cooked goose incident. She didn't really need that demerit against her right now, and she hadn't done anything really wrong as much as her parents knew. She could walk into the house and tell Dad that Hawkins was being a witch, and she left school to preserve her human rights. Surprisingly, Mrs. Pitters was in the living room. "Hi, Miss Pitters." Millie accepted a hug from the woman. "Where's Dad?" "He got a very important call from the shop." "Is everything all right?" "No, I'm supposed to take you down immediately. We are joining your family." This put a hard knot into Millie's stomach, but the broader birthday surprise was unfolding as planned. Step 1 was for Mrs. Pitters to get Millie into the shop and headed to the birthday venue. Step 2 was for Firth to be very serious when Millie arrived. He'd get to close up the shop behind them and join them for the walk to the party. He expected Millie to show up a little bit after 4 p.m. Neither Mrs. Pitters nor Firth knew the steps 3 through 16 had evaporated. Even more than just birthday preparations would evaporate, when Millie stepped into the shop at exactly 4:11 p.m., which happened to be 1 minute before the time that was listed on a birth certificate that the shop had created for Millie exactly 13 years prior. We'll come back to this in a moment after we recount the events of the day. Reggie had masterminded his first of many popular uprisings, taking a certain number of notes on the process, securing Millie's safe return to school the next day, guaranteeing an increase in the budget for the arts from the state legislature, and gaining free access for himself to the teacher's lounge for morning coffee. No helicopters, but free coffee. Pat's was summarily grounded by his mom, not for participating in the coup per se, but for several thousand text messages on his cell phone during school hours. His punishment was reduced when his hockey-loving mother was selected for catered VIP box seats at the arena for the rest of the season. He did not remember entering the family in that drawing, but understood that it could go unmentioned. Jules had walked about 12 miles, scouring the east side of town in a grid pattern, searching for his daughter. He found himself facing Stoney in front of the school where they agreed to meet a few minutes after dismissal. Stoney was facing Jules, wondering why all the parents, fire trucks, and pizza deliveries were surrounding the school. Grandpa had finished decorating the room on a distant planet for a party and was thinking about walking back to the shop to see where everybody was. Firth and Mrs. Pitters were in the shop with Millie, having fulfilled their parts to Millie's surprise birthday dinner flawlessly, completely unaware that Millie was missing and there were people out looking for her. She was, after all, standing next to them. And Millie thought she was in trouble, which was about to come, but not in the way she expected. Having Millie on board without a parent, the shop decided to misbehave. An imperceptibly small wire deep inside the very tiny machines that make up the slightly larger machines that are part of the still small but relatively larger machines that make up the persistence engine that runs the shop woke up. For the first time, they began carrying current in a particular direction that ran counter and backwards to the way things usually worked on the shop. For dozens of years, less in real space, but more in its own functions, the persistence engine had hummed along in a certain direction. Now there was a drain elsewhere and a spill of electrons going this way instead of that. Homie had mentioned something similar to Dad on Harlquat. Mom had seen some evidence of it in a steadily increasing electric bill. Grandpa just felt something was wrong and inserted little notes on the ledgers. But it was never a big enough issue that any of them ever returned to it or connected the separate points. Where this is weird is that the energy draw had nothing to do with anything that was happening with Millie or her family or her terrible mishap of a birthday. It would take them quite a while to find out this was a coincidence. But for right now, the energy drain was ramping up to energy levels that were impacting broader systems. The machine felt it. Not that machines can be pricked and feel pain, like having hair pulled or grabbing the wrong end of the frying pan. Several of the mini programs that coordinate to run the machine noticed energy levels going out of bounds. Those programs fed a certain set of instructions to their parent programs, who in turn reacted. That reaction was fast and decisive. In the time it took Mrs. Pitters to walk out the door on Dalabrator in front of Millie, the machine detached the connection, sealed up all the exits, and waited for instructions. Millie got a glimpse of the wide vista of Dalabrator, the one with the glass and water and lighthouse she had first seen those months ago, before the door slammed shut with a hollow thunk. She was alone with Firth. Millie's birth certificate, the fake one that was created by the shop, said Millie Salmon had been born at 4:12 p.m. on January 11th, 2010. It was now exactly that time on Earth, 13 years to the minute that paperwork suggested Millie had entered the universe. She left it. This was Millie Salmon in the Infinite Shop, Chapter 13, Millie's Birthday. In the next episode, Millie sits inside an absolutely silent shop. Thank you for listening. You can find more about Millie Salmon at milliesalmon.com or join us on Patreon. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever podcast app you use. Millie Salmon in the Infinite Shop is a production of Infinite Shop Limited, which you can follow on all social media platforms. I'm Ray Dubicki. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading some more for you soon.